The moment Tyler and I stepped through the mahogany doors of Romano's steakhouse, my sister Jessica's eyes locked onto my 8-year-old son like a predator spotting prey. Without even a hello, she pointed at the marble floor beside our reserved table and declared in a voice loud enough for neighboring diners to hear, "Sit on the floor, these seats are for the real grandkids." Before I could process what was happening, Jessica kicked Tyler's chair backward with such force that my boy tumbled to the ground, his small body hitting the polished stone with a sickening thud. The entire family erupted in cruel laughter. I should have seen this coming. The drive to Dad's 70th birthday celebration had filled me with foolish hope that maybe, just maybe tonight would be different. Tyler had been so excited carefully buttoning his best white shirt and adjusting his navy blue tie in the bathroom mirror. He'd asked me 3 times if Grandpa Walter would like the wooden picture frame he'd made in art class, the one with "Happy Birthday Grandpa" painted in bright red letters. Romano's was the kind of place that screamed money with crystal chandeliers, casting warm light over leather banquettes, and servers in crisp white jackets gliding between tables laden with prime rib and lobster thermidor. The hostess had smiled warmly at Tyler when we arrived, asking if this was a special occasion. When he proudly announced it was his grandfather's birthday, she'd winked and promised to bring him extra bread rolls. That warmth evaporated the second we reached our table. Jessica stood there in her designer black dress, arms crossed, looking like she'd been waiting for this moment all week. Behind her, my mother Patricia pursed her lips in that familiar expression of disapproval she'd perfected over decades. Uncle Robert chuckled while sipping his bourbon, and Cousin Danny pulled out his phone to record what he clearly anticipated would be entertainment. "Murray, control your charity case." Jessica sneered as I helped Tyler to his feet. My son's eyes were wide with confusion and pain, a red mark already forming on his elbow where he'd struck the floor. The waiter, who'd been approaching our table with menus, stopped mid-stride, his professional smile faltering as he witnessed the ugly scene unfolding. Tyler looked up at me with those trusting brown eyes that had melted my heart 2 years ago when I first met him at the adoption agency. He didn't understand why Aunt Jessica was being mean, why everyone was laughing at his pain, why his own family treated him like an unwanted pest. I saw his lower lip tremble as he tried not to cry, and something inside my chest cracked open. Dad sat at the head of the table, his weathered hands folded over his stomach, saying nothing. This man who'd taught me to stand up for myself, who'd coached my little league team and cheered at every game, just sat there in silence while his granddaughter was humiliated. The betrayal cut deeper than Jessica's cruelty. "Are you folks ready to order?" the waiter asked tentatively, clearly uncomfortable with the tension radiating from our table. Jessica waved him away dismissively, then turned her attention back to Tyler, who was now sitting properly in his chair, small hands clasped in his lap. "I don't know why you even brought him, Murray," she continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is a family dinner. Blood family." The words hit like physical blows. Tyler had been my son for 2 years, legally adopted, after months of paperwork, home visits, and court appearances. He'd lost his birth parents in a car accident when he was 6, spent months in foster care before I found him. The social worker had warned me about attachment issues, but Tyler had opened his heart to me completely, calling me Dad within weeks of moving into our house. Patricia finally spoke up, her voice saccharine sweet with false concern. "Murray, dear, you know we support your decision to help that boy, but family gatherings should really be for actual family members. The laughter resumed quieter this time, but no less cruel. Cousin Danny made a comment about charity tax deductions that sent Uncle Robert into another fit of chuckling. I felt Tyler shrink beside me, making himself as small as possible in his chair. But something else was building inside me, something cold and calculating that had nothing to do with the hot rage I felt at their cruelty. I was remembering numbers, loan documents, financial obligations that suddenly seemed very important. My family had always been comfortable letting me handle their money problems, hadn't they? The waiter returned with bread and water, shooting sympathetic glances at Tyler, who was still fighting back tears. I made my decision then, sitting in that overpriced restaurant, surrounded by people who shared my DNA, but not my values. I was going to pay for dinner tonight. All of it. Every last penny. And then I was going to teach them exactly what family really means. The next 90 minutes felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. I sat in silence, cutting my ribeye into precise pieces while my family continued their psychological assault on Tyler. Every cruel comment, every mocking laugh, every deliberate exclusion was like adding fuel to a fire that burned colder and brighter with each passing moment. Jessica's husband, Brad, a real estate developer who'd never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of his success, leaned across the table toward Tyler. So, kid, what do you want to be when you grow up a professional charity case like you are now? The table erupted again. Uncle Robert nearly choked on his seafood bisque, while Danny held up his phone to capture Tyler's reaction. My mother actually applauded her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light as she clapped her hands together in delight. Tyler looked at me with confusion, not understanding the joke, but knowing instinctively that he was the target. I want to be a financial advisor like my dad, he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the restaurant. Your dad. Jessica's voice rose an octave. Honey Murray isn't your dad. He's just the man who felt sorry for you. There's a difference. I watched my son's face crumble. 8 years old, and these adults were systematically destroying his sense of belonging, his understanding of love and family. The red mark on his elbow had darkened to a bruise, a physical reminder of Jessica's initial assault. Now, Patricia interjected with false sweetness. We shouldn't confuse the boy. Murray is doing a wonderful thing taking care of a child who has nowhere else to go. It's very Christian of him. The condescension was breathtaking. Tyler wasn't a stray puppy I'd rescued from the pound. He was my son legally and emotionally, and their deliberate refusal to acknowledge that fact was calculated cruelty designed to hurt us both. Uncle Robert, emboldened by the wine, and the group dynamics decided to share his wisdom. You know, Murray, when I was growing up, family meant something. Blood meant something. This whole adoption thing, it's just modern nonsense. Nature versus nurture. You understand, the boy will never really be yours. Dad continued eating his prime rib in silence occasionally, nodding at particularly cruel comments but never actively participating in the attack. His complicity was somehow worse than Jessica's active malice. At least she was honest about her hatred. The conversation took an interesting turn when the cousin Danny, 3 glasses of wine deep, let something slip that made my blood run cold. Speaking of family, Danny said with a sloppy grin, are we still meeting Tuesday for Grandpa's will reading? I can't wait to see what properties I'm inheriting. The table went quiet for a moment. Jessica shot Danny a murderous look, while Patricia suddenly became fascinated with her lobster tail. Uncle Robert cleared his throat and changed the subject to the Portland Trailblazers' latest losing streak. But I'd heard enough. The will reading. Tuesday. 3 days from now. And from the guilty expressions around the table, it was clear that Tyler and I weren't invited to that particular family gathering. "What will reading?" I asked, casually, spearing a piece of asparagus. "Oh, nothing important," Jessica said quickly. "Just some boring legal stuff. Nothing that concerns you. Nothing that concerns me." The grandfather who'd supposedly loved me enough to help fund my college education, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who'd cried when I told him about Tyler's adoption, had apparently written me out of his will. And my entire family knew about it. Actually, Dad spoke for the first time all evening, his voice gravelly with age and guilt. "We thought it best to keep things simple. The will covers the family property, and, well," he gestured vaguely at Tyler without looking at either of us. The meaning was crystal clear. My son's presence had apparently disqualified me from family inheritance considerations. Tyler tugged on my sleeve. "Dad, can we go home? I don't feel good." The word "Dad" hit the table like a grenade. Jessica's face twisted with disgust, while Patricia made that clicking sound with her tongue that had annoyed me since childhood. Uncle Robert actually laughed out loud. "Dad," Jessica repeated mockingly. "Did anyone else hear that the kid actually thinks Murray is his father? This is precious." Brad leaned forward with predatory interest. "Maybe we should explain the facts of life to the boy, about how real families work, about blood relations and legal obligations." That's when something inside me snapped. Not into rage, but into clarity. Cold, calculating clarity about relationships and power dynamics and financial leverage. I signaled the waiter and asked for the check. All of it. The entire table's meals, drinks, appetizers, desserts, everything. $675 for a family dinner that had cost me far more than money. Jessica looked genuinely confused when I pulled out my credit card. "Murray, you don't need to pay for everyone. We can split the bill." "No," I said, calmly signing the receipt and adding a generous tip for our waiter, who'd witnessed the ugly family dynamics all evening. "My treat. Consider it a birthday gift to Dad." The drive home was quiet, except for Tyler's occasional sniffles. He'd finally started crying in the parking lot, and I'd held him against my chest while he sobbed out his confusion and hurt. He kept asking why Aunt Jessica hated him, why Grandpa wouldn't talk to him, why everyone had laughed when he got hurt. I didn't have good answers for him. How do you explain adult cruelty to a child? How do you tell an 8-year-old that some people define family so narrowly that love becomes irrelevant? Dad. Tyler's voice was small in the darkness of our sedan. "Are you really not my real dad?" I pulled into our driveway and turned to look at my son, this brave little boy who'd survived losing his birth parents months in foster care, and now this psychological assault from people who should have protected him. Tyler listened to me very carefully. "I am your real dad. You are my real son. Not because of biology, but because we chose each other. Because love makes family, not DNA." He nodded solemnly, then yawned. The emotional exhaustion of the evening was hitting him hard. I carried him upstairs, helped him brush his teeth, and tucked him into bed with his favorite stuffed elephant. Then I went to my home office and pulled out every financial document I'd accumulated over the past decade. It was time to see exactly how much my family's cruelty was going to cost them. Because while they'd been humiliating Tyler, I'd been remembering some very interesting details about loans and co-signatures and financial obligations. Details that were about to become extremely relevant. My family thought they could exclude us from their inheritance plans. That was fine, but they were about to learn that financial relationships work both ways. I spent the next 6 hours in my home office surrounded by manila folders, legal documents, and a growing sense of incredulous rage. Each file I opened revealed another tentacle of financial dependency that I'd somehow forgotten about in my eagerness to help family members over the years. The first discovery was Dad's mortgage refinance from 2 years ago. I remembered him calling desperate because his adjustable rate had jumped and his fixed income couldn't handle the payments. The bank required a co-signer with excellent credit and stable income. Guess who'd stepped up to save the family home? $285,000. That's how much Dad owed on a house that was worth maybe $320,000 in Portland's inflated market. And my signature was on every page of that loan documentation, making me equally responsible for every missed payment. But that was just the beginning. Jessica's business loan for her boutique Elegant Expressions had been signed in my office 18 months ago. She'd sworn it was a sure thing. A high-end women's clothing store in the Pearl District that would make us both rich. $95,000 I'd guaranteed for a business that I now realized was failing miserably, based on the overdue payment notices scattered across her loan file. Uncle Robert's transportation needs had apparently become my problem as well. His $60,000 truck loan bore my signature, along with the $45,000 loan for that ridiculous bass boat he'd bought last summer. I vaguely remembered him mentioning something about improving his credit score, but I'd been distracted with Tyler's adoption paperwork at the time. Patricia's medical loans were perhaps the most galling discovery. $30,000 for cosmetic surgery, a breast augmentation and tummy tuck that she'd claimed was necessary for her self-esteem after Dad's retirement. Because apparently my mother's vanity was worth more than her grandson's dignity. The final insult was Cousin Danny's college loan package. $67,000 for his communications degree from Portland State University, co-signed during a family barbecue where he'd promised to make us all proud. He'd graduated 6 months ago and was currently working part-time at a coffee shop while finding himself. I added up the numbers 3 times, not believing the total. $487,000. Nearly $500,000 in loan obligations that I'd somehow accumulated by being the family's reliable financial backup plan. These people had just spent an entire evening humiliating my son, excluding him from family gatherings and questioning my fitness as a father. And every single one of them owed their current lifestyle to my creditworthiness and financial stability. The irony was breathtaking. They were planning to cut me out of Dad's will because Tyler wasn't real family, but they had no problem using my signature to maintain their standard of living. Blood apparently mattered when it came to inheritance, but not when it came to financial obligations. I started making phone calls at 5:30 in the morning, beginning with First National Bank where Dad's mortgage was held. The customer service representative was polite, but firm. Yes, I could remove my name from the loan, but the primary borrower would need to qualify independently within 30 days, or face immediate foreclosure proceedings. Dad's fixed income of $2,400 per month from Social Security and his small pension wouldn't come close to supporting a mortgage payment of $1,800. The house would be gone within 6 weeks. Jessica's business loan was held by Columbia River Credit Union. Same rules applied. The bank would require proof that elegant expressions could support the loan payments independently, or they'd demand immediate repayment of the outstanding balance. Given that Jessica's boutique had been bleeding money for months, that seemed unlikely. Mountain West Auto Finance held Uncle Robert's vehicle loans. Removing my co-signature would trigger an immediate credit review. Since Robert's retirement income barely covered his basic living expenses, both the truck and the boat would be repossessed within days. Patricia's medical loan through Portland Medical Financing was perhaps the easiest to resolve. They offered a simple co-signer release form that could be processed electronically. Her credit score would take a massive hit when the loan defaulted, but that was no longer my concern. Danny's student loans through Federal Educational Services were slightly more complicated, but they offered a co-signer release after making 12 consecutive on-time payments. Since Danny had defaulted on 3 payments in the past 6 months, my removal would trigger immediate collection proceedings. By 7 o'clock, I'd submitted removal paperwork for every single loan. The banks were remarkably efficient when it came to releasing co-signers, especially when the co-signer was the party with the best credit score and income stability. My phone started ringing at 7:15. Dad's number appeared on the screen, followed immediately by 3 voicemails in increasingly frantic tones. "Murray, son, I need you to call me back immediately. The bank is saying something about foreclosure papers. This must be some kind of mistake." "Murray, it's Dad again. I just talked to First National and they're saying you removed your name from our mortgage. Please call me back. We need to talk about this." "Murray, what the hell is going on? The bank is demanding full payment in 30 days or they're taking the house. You can't do this to us. Call me back right now." I deleted the voicemails without listening to them completely. Tyler was still sleeping peacefully upstairs, exhausted from last night's emotional trauma. I made coffee and sat on our back deck watching the sunrise paint the Cascade Mountains in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with text messages. Jessica, Patricia, Uncle Robert, Danny, even Brad was reaching out now. All of them suddenly very interested in family relationships and communication. The financial nuclear option was elegantly simple. I wasn't stealing anything, wasn't breaking any laws, wasn't even being vindictive in any illegal sense. I was simply exercising my right to remove myself from financial obligations that I'd undertaken voluntarily. If blood was more important than love in defining family, then my family could support themselves with their own blood money. They'd made it clear that Tyler and I weren't welcome at inheritance discussions, so we certainly shouldn't be responsible for maintaining their current lifestyle. My coffee was getting cold when Tyler appeared in the doorway, still wearing his pajamas with cartoon elephant's hair sticking up at odd angles. "Dad, why is your phone making so much noise?" I pulled him onto my lap and pointed at the mountains. "See that sunrise, buddy? Sometimes things have to change for new, beautiful things to happen." Tyler nodded solemnly, not fully understanding, but trusting me completely. That trust was worth more than any inheritance, more valuable than any family approval. It was the foundation of our real family, the one we'd built together through choice and commitment rather than accident of birth. My phone rang again. This time it was Jessica. I turned it off and held my son a little tighter. By noon, the financial avalanche I'd triggered was picking up devastating momentum. Each bank's automated systems were grinding through their protocols with mechanical efficiency, generating notices, updating credit reports, and triggering the cascade of consequences that would reshape my family's reality. First National Bank moved fastest. Dad received official foreclosure proceedings documentation via certified mail at 10:45, along with a demand for immediate payment of the full loan balance. The 30-day grace period I'd mentioned earlier was apparently optimistic. The bank's risk management department had flagged the account for expedited review due to the primary borrower's insufficient income. Columbia River Credit Union was equally swift in their response to Jessica's boutique loan. Their commercial lending department required quarterly financial statements for business loans when cosigners were removed, and Jessica's books were apparently a disaster. Elegant Expressions had been operating at a loss for 8 months, surviving solely on cash advances and delayed vendor payments. I was reviewing Tyler's homework at our kitchen table when the doorbell rang at 1:30. Through the window, I could see Jessica pacing on my front porch, gesticulating wildly while talking on her phone. Behind her stood a police officer, his expression professionally neutral, but clearly uncomfortable with whatever story he'd been told. "Murray Thompson," the officer asked when I opened the door. "I'm Officer Martinez with Portland Police. This lady claims you've stolen money from her family business. She wants to file a report." Jessica pushed past the officer, her face flushed with rage and desperation. "He removed his name from all our loans without permission. That's theft. He's trying to destroy our family." I calmly walked to my home office and returned with a banker's box full of loan documents. "Officer Martinez, every signature on these papers is mine. Every co-signing agreement was entered into voluntarily. I have the legal right to remove myself from any financial obligation I've co-signed." The officer reviewed the paperwork with the careful attention of someone who'd dealt with family financial disputes before. Jessica hovered beside him repeatedly, insisting that there must be some law against what I'd done. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said finally, "your brother hasn't committed any crime. Co-signers have the right to remove themselves from loan agreements provided they follow the lender's procedures. This appears to be a civil matter between family members and financial institutions." Jessica's composure cracked completely. "You don't understand. He's doing this because of what happened at dinner last night. He's using money to punish us for telling the truth about that adopted kid." Tyler appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the shouting. I saw him watching through the banister spindles, his small face tight with anxiety. Officer Martinez noticed, too, his expression shifting as he began to understand the family dynamics at play. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. There's a child present and your current behavior could be considered disturbing the peace." "That's not even his real child," Jessica shrieked. "Murray has no right to put some random orphan above his actual family." The officer's patience evaporated. "Ma'am, adoption creates the same legal parent-child relationship as biological birth, and I'm warning you about your language and volume. You need to calm down, or I'll have to escort you off the property." I glanced up at Tyler and saw him retreating to his room, probably to hide under his bed with his stuffed elephant, like he'd done during thunderstorms when he first moved in. The sight of my son fleeing from adult conflict that he didn't understand and couldn't control ignited a protective fury that I struggled to contain. "Officer, I'd appreciate it if you'd ask my sister to leave my property now. She's frightening my son." Martinez nodded curtly and turned to Jessica. "Ma'am, you need to go. You have no legal grounds for your complaint, and you're creating a disturbance. If you continue to harass this family, you could face charges for trespassing and harassment." Jessica looked genuinely shocked that law enforcement wasn't taking her side. "This is ridiculous. You can't just let him destroy our entire family over a dinner argument. "Ma'am, your brother has the right to manage his own financial obligations as he sees fit. Now, please leave the property voluntarily or I'll have to escort you." As Jessica stormed toward her car, she turned back to shout one final threat. "This isn't over. Murray family means something whether you want to acknowledge it or not. You'll regret choosing that kid over your real relatives." Officer Martinez lingered after Jessica drove away, clearly wanting to understand the full situation. "Sir, do you mind me asking what happened at this dinner she mentioned?" I gave him a brief summary of the previous evening's events, focusing on the deliberate humiliation of Tyler and the family's refusal to acknowledge our parent-child relationship. Martinez listened with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much human cruelty. "For what it's worth," he said finally, "you're doing the right thing protecting your son. I've got kids myself, and family loyalty should flow both ways. If they can't respect your boy, they don't deserve your financial support." After the officer left, I found Tyler in his room, indeed hiding under his bed, with Mr. Peanut, his stuffed elephant. I coaxed him out and held him while he cried again, overwhelmed by adult conflicts he couldn't comprehend. "Why does Aunt Jessica keep being mean to us?" he asked between sniffles. "Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices about how to treat people," I said carefully. "But you know what? We get to choose who we want in our family. And our family is you and me, no matter what anyone else says." My phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the afternoon. Voicemails from Patricia, Uncle Robert, Danny, even neighbors who'd apparently been contacted by desperate family members seeking allies. The financial pressure was building exactly as I'd anticipated. That evening, while Tyler worked on a puzzle in the living room, my ex-wife Amanda called. Her tone was carefully neutral, which usually meant she'd heard something concerning through our mutual acquaintances. "Murray, I got an interesting call today from your sister. She seemed to think I'd be willing to discuss Tyler's living situation with her." My blood chilled. What did she want? "She asked a lot of questions about your parenting, your financial stability, whether Tyler seemed happy with you." I told her it was none of her business and hung up, but I thought you should know. Jessica was apparently expanding her attack beyond financial pressure. She was now questioning my fitness as a parent, probably building a case to challenge Tyler's placement with me. The realization that she'd stooped to threatening my son's security pushed my anger into territories I'd never explored before. "Amanda, if she contacts you again, please document the conversation and let me know immediately. I may need to involve family court if this escalates." "Of course. And Murray Tyler's lucky to have you. Don't let your crazy family make you doubt that." After Tyler went to bed, I sat in my office calculating the full scope of what I'd set in motion. By my estimates, my family was facing combined financial obligations of nearly $500,000 within the next 60 days. Dad would lose his house. Jessica would lose her business. Uncle Robert would lose his vehicles. Patricia would face collection proceedings, and Danny would see his wages garnished. The beautiful part was the mathematical precision of it all. No emotion, no revenge, just pure financial cause and effect. They'd chosen to exclude Tyler from family consideration based on their narrow definition of blood relationships. So I'd simply applied their same logic to financial relationships. If Tyler wasn't family enough for inheritance purposes, then I wasn't family enough for loan guarantee purposes. The equation balanced perfectly. The call from Richard Blackwell came at 9:15 the next morning, just as I was dropping Tyler off at Riverside Elementary School. Richard had been the family's attorney for over 20 years, handling everything from Dad's business incorporation to Patricia's divorce from my stepfather. "Murray, we need to talk immediately." Richard's voice carried an urgency that I'd never heard before. "Can you come to my office this morning? There are some legal matters involving your family that require immediate attention." I arranged for my business partner, Kevin, to handle my morning appointments and drove downtown to Richard's law firm, Morrison, Blackwell and Associates. The office occupied 3 floors of a restored brick building in Portland's legal district, with mahogany paneling and leather furniture that projected old-money respectability. Richard greeted me in his corner office, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. Documents covered his normally pristine desk, and his secretary had apparently been fielding phone calls all morning from various family members. "Murray, I'm going to be direct with you." Richard began settling into his chair with visible discomfort. "Your family has been planning legal action against you regarding Tyler's adoption status." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What kind of legal action?" Richard pulled out a thick folder and spread its contents across his desk. "They've been building a case to challenge your fitness as an adoptive parent. The grounds they're pursuing include financial instability due to excessive debt obligations, emotional instability evidenced by vindictive behavior toward family members, and neglect of Tyler's emotional needs by exposing him to family conflict." I stared at the documents in disbelief. Court filings, witness statements, even photographs of Tyler looking sad at family gatherings over the past year. They'd been documenting everything, building a case designed to rip my son away from the only stable home he'd ever known. "Richard, you can't be serious. They're the ones who've been cruel to Tyler, not me. I've been protecting him from their abuse. I understand that Murray, and personally, I think their case is ethically questionable at best. But legally, they have some concerning evidence." He showed me a series of documents that made my stomach turn. Jessica had been recording conversations with Tyler during family visits, editing them to make it sound like he was unhappy or confused about his living situation. Patricia had taken photos of Tyler crying at various family events, without context, showing that their own behavior had caused his distress. Most disturbing was a detailed financial analysis of my loan obligations, compiled with help from someone who clearly understood credit reporting and debt-to-income ratios. They'd calculated my total guaranteed debt at over $400,000, arguing that this level of financial exposure made me an unsuitable guardian for a vulnerable child. "The strategy seems to be painting you as financially irresponsible and emotionally volatile," Richard continued. "Last night's dinner incident was apparently the final piece they needed. Multiple witnesses claim you had an angry outburst and left abruptly, then engaged in vindictive financial retaliation against family members who were simply expressing concerns about Tyler's well-being. The manipulation was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. They'd deliberately provoked conflict, documented my protective response, then used both the initial abuse and my reaction as evidence against my parenting fitness. Richard, do they have any chance of success with this? He hesitated, which was answer enough. Family court judges are very concerned about stability for adopted children, especially those who've already experienced trauma from losing their biological parents. If they can convince a judge that Tyler's current situation is detrimental to his development. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. These people had spent years accepting my financial support while secretly planning to destroy my family. The dinner at Romano's hadn't been an isolated incident of cruelty. It had been a calculated provocation designed to generate evidence for their legal assault. "There's more, Murray," Richard said quietly. "They've already contacted Child Protective Services with their concerns. There's going to be an investigation." My phone rang at that moment. Jennifer Walsh, Tyler's adoption attorney, her voice tight with professional concern. "Murray, I just received notification that CPS is opening an investigation into Tyler's placement. They've received reports alleging financial instability and emotional abuse. We need to meet immediately to prepare our response." I left Richard's office in a daze, my mind reeling from the scope of my family's betrayal. They hadn't just been cruel to Tyler, they'd been systematically preparing to take him away from me. Every family gathering, every interaction with my son had been an opportunity for them to gather ammunition for their attack. The drive to Jennifer Walsh's office gave me time to process the full implications. If CPS found any validity to their allegations, Tyler could be removed from my home pending a full investigation. He'd already lost one family through tragedy. Now he faced losing another through deliberate malice. Jennifer's office was located in a converted house near the courthouse with child-friendly furniture and toys scattered throughout the waiting area. She specialized in adoption and family reunification cases, and her reputation for fierce advocacy had been one of the reasons I'd chosen her to handle Tyler's adoption. "Murray, sit down and tell me everything that's happened in the last 48 hours," Jennifer said, pulling out a legal pad. "Don't leave out any details, no matter how minor they seem." I walked her through the entire sequence: the dinner at Romano's, Jessica's deliberate humiliation of Tyler, the family's exclusion of us from inheritance planning, and my decision to remove myself from their financial obligations. Jennifer took notes steadily, occasionally asking for clarification about specific incidents or timelines. "Now, tell me about the CPS allegations," she said when I finished. Richard showed me their legal strategy. They're claiming financial instability due to my co-signing obligations, emotional instability because I withdrew financial support after they abused Tyler, and neglect because I've exposed him to family conflict. Jennifer's expression grew increasingly grim as I detailed the scope of their prepared case. "Murray, this is a sophisticated legal attack. Someone with real knowledge of family law helped them structure these allegations to exploit the vulnerabilities in adoption cases." "What vulnerabilities?" "Adoptive families face higher scrutiny than biological families. Courts worry about attachment issues, financial motivations, and the stability of relationships that aren't based on blood ties. Your family is essentially arguing that stress has revealed the artificial nature of your bond with Tyler." The cynical manipulation was staggering. They were using the legal system's inherent bias toward biological family structures to attack the very foundation of Tyler's security. "What's our defense strategy?" Jennifer smiled grimly. "We're going to expose their coordinated harassment campaign and demonstrate that Tyler's well-being is threatened by their behavior, not yours. But first, we need to address the CPS investigation." She explained that Child Protective Services would likely interview Tyler at school within the next few days, examining his physical condition, emotional state, and understanding of his family situation. They'd also conduct a home visit to assess the living environment and my parenting capabilities. The good news is that Tyler is clearly thriving in your care. He's doing well academically, has friends, participates in activities, and shows every sign of a secure attachment to you. The challenge is countering their narrative about financial instability and emotional volatility. I thought about Tyler's recent parent-teacher conference where Mrs. Rodriguez had praised his improvement in social skills and academic performance since starting third grade. His therapist, Dr. Phillips, had noted significant progress in processing his grief over losing his birth parents and building trust in his new family structure. Jennifer, they've been planning this for months, maybe longer. The dinner last night was a setup to provoke exactly the reaction I had. That's actually helpful for our case. If we can prove premeditation and coordination in their harassment campaign, it undermines their credibility and demonstrates that Tyler needs protection from them, not from you. We spent the next hour developing a comprehensive response strategy. Jennifer would request copies of all CPS reports and interview notes challenge any evidence obtained through deception or manipulation, and present documentation of Tyler's positive development in my care. Meanwhile, I needed to gather evidence of the family's coordinated campaign of emotional abuse. Phone records, text messages, witness statements from restaurant staff, anything that demonstrated the systematic nature of their attacks on Tyler's emotional well-being. As I was leaving Jennifer's office, she pulled me aside for a final warning. "Murray, they're going to escalate this conflict. Be prepared for them to get increasingly desperate as their financial situation deteriorates. Document everything. Stay calm, regardless of provocation, and remember that Tyler's watching how you handle this crisis. Your response to their attacks will either reinforce or undermine his sense of security." Driving home, I realized that my family's true colors had finally been revealed in their full ugliness. They were willing to traumatize a vulnerable child to maintain their financial comfort and satisfy their prejudices about adoption. The people who'd raised me, who'd supposedly taught me about love and loyalty, were prepared to destroy an 8-year-old boy's life, rather than acknowledge him as legitimate family. But they'd made one crucial mistake in their planning. They'd underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect my son. The revelation about my family's legal conspiracy had shifted something fundamental in my approach to this conflict. What started as reactive financial pressure was now strategic warfare, and I had resources they didn't know about. Kevin Martinez, my business partner at Cascade Financial Advisors, had been handling some irregularities in our client accounts for several weeks, but he'd kept the details confidential while conducting his investigation. "Murray, you need to see this immediately," Kevin said when I arrived at our office that afternoon. His normally cheerful demeanor was replaced by grim professionalism as he led me to his computer workstation. "I've been tracking some unauthorized access to our client database, and I think your family situation just got a lot more complicated." Kevin pulled up a series of computer logs showing access attempts to our secure client information system. The timestamps showed repeated login attempts using variations of my credentials originating from IP addresses that our security consultant had traced to locations throughout Portland. Someone's been systematically attempting to access client financial records for the past 3 months. Kevin explained, highlighting specific entries in the access logs. They've been particularly interested in retirement accounts and trust fund portfolios. My stomach dropped. "Are you saying someone in my family has been trying to steal client information?" "It's worse than that, Murray. Look at these bank records." Kevin showed me a series of financial transactions that made my blood run cold. Unauthorized transfers from client investment accounts, forged authorization forms bearing my signature, and a complex web of shell accounts designed to hide the flow of stolen funds. The computer forensics expert Kevin had hired a former FBI specialist named Marcus Webb, had spent weeks tracing the digital footprints left by whoever was conducting the thefts. His findings painted a picture of sophisticated financial fraud that had been operating under my nose for months. The perpetrator has been using your credentials and forged signatures to authorize transfers from elderly clients' retirement accounts. Marcus explained when he arrived at our office an hour later. They've stolen approximately $340,000 over the past year. I stared at the evidence spread across Kevin's conference table, my professional reputation crumbling before my eyes. If this theft was discovered by regulatory authorities, I'd lose my financial advisor license, face federal fraud charges, and potentially serve years in prison. Do we know who's responsible? Marcus pulled out a surveillance photograph from First National Bank's security cameras. The image was grainy but unmistakable. My father, Walter Thompson, standing at a teller window with a stack of documents bearing my forged signature. Your father has been the primary perpetrator using your stolen identification and forged authorizations to access client accounts. But the operation appears to involve multiple family members in supporting roles. Kevin showed me additional evidence that painted an even darker picture. Jessica's failing boutique had been funded not through her legitimate business loan, but through client money stolen from retirement accounts. Patricia's cosmetic surgery bills had been paid with funds transferred from an 87-year-old widow's pension account. Uncle Robert's boat purchase had been financed through the retirement savings of a 92-year-old veteran. They've been systematically robbing your most vulnerable clients, Marcus continued. Elderly people who trusted you with their life savings, many of whom won't discover the thefts until they need the money for medical care or nursing homes. The betrayal was so profound that I struggled to comprehend its scope. My family hadn't just been cruel to Tyler, they'd been destroying the financial security of innocent seniors while using my professional reputation as cover for their crimes. Marcus, how did they obtain my credentials and identification? Based on the access patterns, someone with regular access to your home office has been photographing documents and copying electronic files. The sophisticated nature of the forgeries suggests professional assistance, possibly from someone in the banking or legal industry. I thought about all the times family members had visited our house, all the occasions when someone could have accessed my home office while I was distracted with Tyler or household tasks. They'd been planning this financial fraud for months, just like they'd been planning their legal attack on Tyler's adoption. The timing isn't coincidental, Kevin observed grimly. They ramped up the thefts significantly after you began co-signing their loans. They were essentially double-dipping, getting your legitimate financial support while also stealing from your clients. My phone rang with a call from FBI Special Agent Lisa Chen, Financial Crimes Division. Marcus had contacted federal authorities as soon as the scope of the fraud became clear, and they'd been conducting their own investigation for the past week. Mr. Thompson, we need to meet immediately to discuss the unauthorized access to client funds at your firm. We have evidence of systematic financial elder abuse that requires immediate intervention. The FBI field office was located in a nondescript building downtown, but Agent Chen's credentials and jurisdiction were unmistakable. She was a 15-year veteran of financial crimes investigation, specializing in cases involving identity theft and elder abuse. Mr. Thompson, our investigation has revealed that your father and several other family members have been conducting sophisticated fraud using your professional credentials. Agent Chen began laying out a file thick with bank records and forensic evidence. We've identified victims ranging from 68 to 96 years of age, many of whom have lost significant portions of their retirement savings. The total amount stolen exceeds federal thresholds for major financial crimes prosecution. She showed me photographs of the victims' elderly faces that I recognized from years of client meetings and financial planning sessions. Harold Peterson, 92. A World War II veteran whose pension account had been drained to pay for Uncle Robert's recreational vehicle purchases. Dorothy Williams, 84. A retired teacher whose savings had funded Jessica's boutique renovation. Agent Chen. I had no knowledge of these thefts. My family had access to my home office, but I never authorized any of these transactions. We understand that, Mr. Thompson. Our investigation indicates that you're a victim of identity theft and professional credential abuse, not a perpetrator. But we need your cooperation to build the cases against the actual criminals. The FBI had been monitoring my family's activities for days, gathering evidence for a coordinated arrest operation. They'd obtained warrants for Walter's house, Jessica's business, Patricia's residence, and Uncle Robert's property. The raids were scheduled for the following morning. What about Tyler? I asked, thinking about my son's emotional state if he witnessed federal agents arresting his grandfather. We'll coordinate with local child protective services to ensure Tyler's well-being during the operation. Given the family's ongoing legal attack on his placement with you, this evidence of their criminal behavior should effectively end any custody challenges. Agent Chen was right. My family's carefully constructed legal case against my parenting fitness would collapse once their systematic fraud was exposed. No family court would consider placing Tyler with relatives who had been stealing from elderly victims. The drive home gave me time to process the full implications of what I'd learned. My family's financial difficulties hadn't been caused by normal economic pressures. They'd been living beyond their means by stealing from vulnerable seniors. Their attack on Tyler's security hadn't been motivated by concern for his well-being. It had been designed to maintain access to my professional reputation and home office. When I picked Tyler up from his after-school program, he immediately sensed my emotional turmoil. "Dad, you look sad. Did someone else say mean things about our family?" I held him close in the parking lot of the community center, overwhelmed by the contrast between his innocent trust and my family's calculated malice. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices that hurt other people, I said carefully. But you know what? Tomorrow we're going to help some people who were hurt, and that's going to make things better. Tyler nodded solemnly, not understanding the details, but trusting completely in my judgment. His faith in our relationship was unshakable, even as my birth family was revealed to be criminals willing to destroy lives for their own benefit. That evening, while Tyler worked on his homework at the kitchen table, I called every client whose accounts had been compromised. Many of them were shocked to learn about the thefts, while others had noticed discrepancies, but assumed they were administrative errors. Harold Peterson, the 92-year-old veteran, started crying when I explained what had happened to his pension account. "Murray, I trusted your family because I trusted you," he said through his tears. "My wife died last month and I was planning to use that money for her funeral expenses. How am I going to pay for her burial now? I promised Harold that he'd be fully compensated for his losses even if I had to pay the restitution from my own savings. The FBI had assured me that asset recovery was possible, but the legal process could take months or years. After Tyler went to bed, I sat in my office preparing for the next day's arrests. My family had spent months planning Tyler's removal from our home while simultaneously stealing from elderly victims. Their cruelty had no limits. Their greed, no boundaries. But tomorrow, federal agents would demonstrate that actions have consequences, that fraud carries penalties, and that elder abuse is a serious crime regardless of family relationships. My phone buzzed with another desperate voicemail from Walter, pleading for a family meeting to work things out. I deleted it without listening to the complete message. Some things couldn't be worked out. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. Some family relationships were better ended than endured. The FBI raids began at 6 o'clock in the morning with military precision. I watched from my kitchen window as unmarked vehicles surrounded Dad's house 3 blocks away. Federal agents in tactical vests moving with practiced efficiency. Tyler was still sleeping, unaware that his grandfather's world was collapsing in real time. Agent Chen had coordinated the operation to hit all 4 properties simultaneously, preventing any family members from warning each other or destroying evidence. Walter's house, Jessica's boutique, Patricia's apartment, and Uncle Robert's property were all searched within a 30-minute window. My phone rang constantly as the arrests unfolded. First, Patricia sobbing and incoherent as agents executed their warrant. Then, Jessica screaming about harassment and false accusations, even as they led her away in handcuffs. Uncle Robert's call was the most pathetic, begging me to contact our family attorney and post bail. I answered none of them. At 7:30, Agent Chen called to provide an update. Mr. Thompson, we've recovered extensive evidence from all 4 locations. Your father's house contained forged documents, stolen client information, and detailed records of fraudulent transactions going back 18 months. The evidence was damning beyond my worst fears. Walter's home office contained client files that he'd stolen from my house, along with practice sheets where he'd perfected forging my signature. Jessica's boutique had a hidden safe containing cash, jewelry, and documents showing how stolen funds had been laundered through her business accounts. The most disturbing discovery was at your mother's apartment. Agent Chen continued. We found audio recordings of conversations with Tyler, along with what appears to be a detailed psychological profile designed to make him appear emotionally unstable. Patricia had been documenting Tyler's reactions to family conflict editing recordings to remove context and make his natural responses to their abuse sound like evidence of behavioral problems. She'd been building a fake psychological case to support their custody challenge, manufacturing evidence of emotional disturbance that they'd caused themselves. Agent Chen, how extensive is the identity theft operation? Your father has been using your credentials to access not just client accounts, but also credit reporting services, bank databases, and professional licensing boards. He's been systematically monitoring your business relationships to identify vulnerable targets for fraud. The sophistication of Walter's operation was breathtaking. He'd been studying my client base like a predator, selecting prey targeting elderly investors who were isolated, trusting, and unlikely to notice small discrepancies in their account statements for months. We also found evidence that your sister Jessica was running an identity theft ring using information stolen from your clients, Agent Chen added. Bank records show she's been creating fake identification documents and credit accounts using elderly victims' personal information. I felt physically sick, thinking about Dorothy Williams, the 84-year-old retired teacher whose identity had been stolen to fund Jessica's shopping sprees. Or Harold Peterson, whose Social Security number was being used to obtain credit cards that would destroy his posthumous financial reputation. Mr. Thompson, there's one more thing you should know. We found detailed surveillance records showing that your family has been monitoring your house and Tyler's school for months. This goes well beyond financial fraud into stalking and child endangerment territory. The revelation that they'd been watching Tyler's movements added a sinister dimension to their campaign that made my protective instincts flare. They hadn't just been cruel during family gatherings. They'd been actively surveilling my 8-year-old son like he was a criminal target. Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by my phone conversations and obvious distress. "Dad, is everything okay? You look worried." I pulled him onto my lap, holding him close while processing the full scope of what we'd survived. "Tyler, remember how I told you that sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices? Well, some people in our family made choices that hurt other families, and now they have to face consequences for those choices." Tyler nodded seriously, not understanding the details, but sensing the gravity of the situation. "Are we in trouble too?" "Nobody. We're safe, and we're going to help the people who got hurt." That's what good families do. They protect each other and help fix problems. At 9 o'clock, local news crews arrived outside Walter's house, having been tipped off about the federal financial crimes operation. Channel 8 ran a breaking news segment about the arrest of a Portland man for elder abuse fraud, showing footage of Walter being led away in handcuffs, while neighbors watched in shock. Jennifer Walsh called to update me on the CPS investigation. "Murray, the charges against your family have completely reversed the custody inquiry. Child Protective Services is now treating Tyler as a potential victim of harassment rather than questioning his placement with you. The evidence of systematic surveillance and psychological manipulation had convinced CPS investigators that Tyler needed protection from my family, not from me. Their coordinated campaign to document his distress while simultaneously causing it demonstrated a level of calculated child abuse that horrified the caseworkers. Furthermore, the family court judge has issued protective orders preventing any of your arrested relatives from contacting Tyler or approaching his school. Their custody challenge has been dismissed with prejudice." I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For months, I'd been fighting to protect Tyler from people I'd thought were simply cruel and greedy. Now I understood they were criminals, willing to traumatize a vulnerable child to maintain their access to victims and avoid consequences for their crimes. By noon, the full scope of the arrests was making regional news. Jessica's identity theft ring had victimized over 200 elderly residents across 3 counties, making it one of the largest elder abuse cases in Oregon's history. Patricia was charged as an accessory for her role in manufacturing false psychological evidence about Tyler. Uncle Robert's arrest was particularly satisfying because they'd found his boat filled with stolen merchandise that he'd been planning to transport to Canada. Apparently, his retirement hobby involved receiving stolen goods purchased with elderly victims' credit cards. The afternoon brought a parade of client calls, some expressing support and understanding, others demanding explanations for how their trusted financial advisor's family had gained access to their personal information. I spent hours on the phone reassuring people that their accounts were secure and that full restitution would be provided. Harold Peterson called to thank me for ensuring that his wife's funeral expenses would be covered. "Murray, I know this must be hard for you having your own family turn out to be criminals. But you did the right thing stopping them." Dorothy Williams was more philosophical about the theft of her retirement savings. "Honey, I've lived 84 years, and I've learned that blood doesn't make family. Character makes family. That little boy of yours is lucky to have a father with integrity." As evening approached, Tyler and I sat together on our couch, his small body curled against my side while he worked on a coloring book. The house felt different, somehow lighter and more peaceful than it had in months. The constant underlying tension of family conflict had been replaced by a sense of resolution and safety. Dad or Grandpa and Aunt Jessica going to jail. They made choices that hurt a lot of people, Tyler. When grown-ups break important rules, they have to go to timeout just like kids do, except it's called jail and it lasts much longer. Tyler considered this information carefully. Will they say they're sorry to the people they hurt? The question broke my heart with its innocence. My 8-year-old son was still hoping for redemption and accountability from people who'd shown no capacity for either. I don't know, buddy. Some people have trouble saying sorry even when they've done wrong things. But the important thing is that you and I always try to do the right thing, especially when it's hard. Tyler nodded and returned to coloring his world secure in the knowledge that his dad would always protect him. Outside, the sun was setting behind the Cascade Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples that promised a better tomorrow. The FBI had recovered most of the stolen funds, frozen the criminals' assets, and dismantled the identity theft operation that had victimized hundreds of elderly victims. Justice wasn't just an abstract concept. It was a concrete result achieved through courage evidence and the determination to protect vulnerable people from predators. My family had shown their true colors, and those colors were the black and white stripes of prison uniforms. 6 months later, Tyler and I were building a snowman in our front yard when the mail carrier delivered the final restitution check from the Federal Asset Recovery Program. $230,000 to be distributed among the elderly victims of my family's fraud ring, representing the liquidation of Walter's house, Jessica's business assets, and Patricia's jewelry collection. Dad, can we give him stick arms like Mr. Peanut? Tyler asked, referring to his beloved stuffed elephant as he positioned branches on our snowman's sides. Absolutely, buddy. What do you think about carrot eyes instead of coal? Tyler giggled at the silly suggestion. Carrots are for noses, Dad. Everyone knows that. The past half year had brought healing and growth that I couldn't have imagined during those dark days of family warfare. Tyler was thriving in 4th grade, his confidence rebuilt through therapy with Dr. Phillips and the unwavering support of our chosen family. His birth trauma and abandonment fears had largely resolved, replaced by secure attachment and genuine happiness. My financial advisory practice had actually grown stronger following the fraud investigation. Clients appreciated my integrity in exposing my family's crimes even at personal cost, and referrals had increased significantly. The Oregon Financial Advisory Board had commended me for my cooperation with federal investigators and my commitment to protecting vulnerable investors. Cascade Financial Advisors now specialized in elder financial protection, offering services designed to prevent the kind of abuse that Walter and Jessica had perpetrated. Kevin and I had developed educational seminars about financial fraud recognition, and I'd become a regional spokesman for elder abuse prevention programs. The legal resolution had been swift and comprehensive. Walter received 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with mandatory gambling addiction treatment. His house foreclosure had been completed months ago, and he was now residing in a minimum security facility in eastern Oregon. Jessica's 36-month sentence reflected the scope of her identity theft operation and her role as the conspiracy's mastermind. Her boutique had been permanently closed, its assets liquidated to compensate victims. The identity theft ring she'd orchestrated had been completely dismantled by federal authorities. Patricia's sentence was lighter, but no less devastating to her lifestyle. 12 months in county jail, followed by community service at a senior center where she'd be helping the same demographic she'd victimized. Her apartment had been sold to pay restitution, and she'd be living in subsidized housing upon her release. Uncle Robert's boat truck and other recreational toys had been seized and sold, with proceeds going to victim compensation. His 6-month sentence had been served in a local facility, but his credit was destroyed, and his retirement plans permanently altered. The most satisfying aspect of their punishment was the complete reversal of their financial positions. The family members who'd lived comfortable lives through stolen money were now facing years of financial insecurity, while their elderly victims were being made whole through asset recovery. "Dad, look what I made at school." Tyler bounded through our front door carrying a construction paper card decorated with glitter and crayon hearts. "It's a Valentine for you." I opened the homemade card to find Tyler's careful handwriting. "Dear Dad, thank you for being the best family ever. Love, Tyler Thompson." Tyler Thompson. He'd asked to legally change his last name to match mine, and the court had approved the petition without hesitation. Judge Martinez had commented that she'd rarely seen such a clear case of a child choosing his family based on love rather than legal obligation. "Tyler, this is the most beautiful Valentine I've ever received," I said, pulling him into a hug that lasted longer than he probably expected. "Dad, can we invite Mrs. Sarah and Emma over for dinner this weekend? Emma said she wants to see my new Lego spaceship." Sarah Martinez was Tyler's teacher from 3rd grade, now promoted to 4th grade counselor at Riverside Elementary. We'd started dating slowly over the past 3 months, bonding over our shared commitment to children's well-being and educational excellence. Her daughter Emma was Tyler's age, and the kids had become close friends. "That sounds perfect, buddy. Maybe we can make homemade pizza and watch that new animated movie you've been wanting to see." Tyler's social circle had expanded dramatically since the toxic influence of my birth family had been removed from our lives. He'd made genuine friends at school, joined the youth soccer league, and was learning to play piano with Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who'd become an honorary grandmother figure. The doorbell rang, and Tyler raced to answer it. "Dad, it's Mrs. Williams." Dorothy Williams, the 84-year-old retired teacher whose savings had been stolen by Jessica, had become one of our closest friends. She had taken a grandmotherly interest in Tyler, teaching him to bake cookies and helping with homework when I worked late. "Tyler, sweetheart, I brought you something special," Dorothy said, pulling a wrapped package from her purse. "It's a book about space exploration that I thought you might enjoy." Tyler's eyes lit up as he unwrapped the gift. "Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy. Dad, can we read it together tonight?" Watching Tyler interact with Dorothy, I was struck by the contrast between her genuine affection and my birth family's conditional cruelty. Dorothy chose to love Tyler simply because he was a good kid who deserved kindness. She didn't care about his adoption status, his background, or any arbitrary definition of family legitimacy. "Murray, how are things going with the victim compensation program?" Dorothy asked while Tyler explored his new book. "The final distributions should be completed next month. Everyone who was affected by the fraud will be fully compensated with interest. The federal recovery program has been more successful than anyone expected." Dorothy nodded with satisfaction. "You know, losing that money was terrible, but watching you protect your son and help all of us get justice was worth more than any dollar amount. That boy is lucky to have you." The comment reminded me of all the genuine support Tyler and I had received throughout the crisis. Sarah's encouragement during the CPS investigation, Kevin's loyalty despite the damage to our business reputation, Jennifer Walsh's fierce advocacy in family court, even Officer Martinez's kindness during Jessica's harassment. Our chosen family was extensive and loving in ways that my birth family had never been. We were surrounded by people who celebrated Tyler's adoption, supported our relationship, and demonstrated daily that love creates stronger bonds than biology. That evening, after Tyler had finished his homework and Dorothy had returned home, Sarah and Emma joined us for dinner. Tyler and Emma disappeared to his room to work on a puzzle, while Sarah and I cleaned dishes and planned our weekend activities. Murray, I've been thinking about something," Sarah said as we finished loading the dishwasher. "Emma keeps asking when Tyler's going to be her official brother. I think she's assuming we're going to get married." I'd been thinking about the same thing, but I'd been cautious about moving too quickly given Tyler's trauma history and the recent family upheaval. "What did you tell her?" I told her that families form in different ways and different time frames, but that love is what makes relationships real. Then she asked if that meant Tyler was already her brother because she loves him. Sarah's wisdom in handling our blended family dynamics was one of the many reasons I'd fallen in love with her. She understood that Tyler needed stability and security above all else, and she'd been patient with his adjustment to having another adult in his life. "Sarah, I think Emma might be right about the brother thing, and I think she might be right about the other thing too." I pulled out a small jewelry box that I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Sarah's gasp brought Tyler and Emma running from his bedroom, drawn by the sound of adult excitement. "Dad, is that a ring?" Tyler asked with wide eyes. "Tyler, what would you think if Sarah became part of our family officially?" Tyler looked back and forth between Sarah and me, processing the implications with the seriousness he brought to all important decisions. "Would that mean Emma would be my sister?" "If that's what you'd like," Sarah said gently. Tyler grinned with pure joy. "Yes, Dad, you should definitely marry Mrs. Sarah so Emma can be my sister." Emma squealed with delight and threw her arms around Tyler in a celebratory hug. "We're going to be a real family." 6 months ago, my son had been told by my birth family that he wasn't real family, that adoption didn't create genuine relationships, that blood was the only thing that mattered. Tonight, he was celebrating the formation of a new family based entirely on choice, commitment, and love. The irony was beautiful and complete. As we planned our engagement celebration and discussed wedding details with 2 excited children, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Tyler had survived losing his birth parents months in foster care adoption adjustment and a systematic campaign of emotional abuse by people who should have protected him. But he'd also discovered that family isn't about DNA or inheritance or traditional definitions of belonging. Family is about people who choose to love you unconditionally, who protect you from harm, who celebrate your successes and comfort you during failures. Tyler had taught me that courage means standing up for what's right even when it's difficult, that love is stronger than blood, and that chosen families often become the most authentic relationships we'll ever experience. Tonight, as we tucked our children into their beds and planned our future together, I knew that Tyler would grow up understanding that he was wanted, valued, and completely legitimate as a family member. Not because a court had finalized his adoption, but because every single day he was surrounded by people who chose to love him. The final lesson from our journey was simple, but profound. True family is defined by loyalty, protection, and unconditional love. Blood may be thicker than water, but love is thicker than blood. And love always wins in the end. What do you think makes a real family? Is it the people you're born to, or the people who choose to love and protect you no matter what? Share your thoughts in the comments below about families that are built through choice rather than chance. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of chosen family, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and the triumph of love over cruelty. Share this with someone who needs to remember that they deserve unconditional love and protection, regardless of their background or circumstances. Thank you for listening to Tyler's story and mine, and I hope you'll remember that every child deserves to be celebrated as a precious member of their family, not tolerated as an outsider looking in.